It is 3:05 on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. The Committee on Human Services will come to order. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and for joining us. As the co-chair on the Human Services Committee, I just thought it was very important that we took a look at waste, fraud, and abuse and program integrity early on this session. It seems like nearly every week we unfortunately hear about new cases of large-scale human services fraud here in the state of Minnesota. And I think it's important to say that Minnesota taxpayers expect that their dollars are going to go to the people who need it. And members of this committee know that there are some urgent needs out there. And so any dollar that is being wasted, is being lost to fraud, means that there are fewer resources to help those who are truly in need. And I think as U.S. Attorney Andy Lugar stated back in December, Minnesota has a fraud problem. And that's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation today early in session to talk about what we can do to get to the root of this issue and to prevent it from going forward. And I think it's important for the goal of the committee today is to understand what are the resources, abilities, and progress that's been made in combating waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think also more importantly, what are some of the solutions that this committee, this legislature, and the state agencies can do to help address waste, fraud, and abuse going forward. And so I look forward to the conversation around solutions today. And I think we have a lot of experts in the room who can provide those insights. So with that, we're going to start off today with a presentation from the Office of the Legislative Auditor. And so, Ms. Randall, I'd turn it over to you. And if you could introduce yourself and your team and start with your presentation, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that on? Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Really appreciate you having us here today to talk about oversight.
Ms. Randall, if you could just wait 1 second. I have a question from Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you go through this, if there's anything in here that the legislature passed as a law that addresses it, because it's so confusing whether it's like it happened 4 years ago or it just happened last month, if we've done something that would address it, could you just note that as we go forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid and Ms. Randall. Yeah, I think as you're going through your presentation, it's just helpful to know, what progress has been made or if there are items that are outstanding as well that we should consider. So thank you, and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator McQuaid. Yes, we absolutely intend to touch on some of those items because there has been some action, and there has been a lot of discussion over the past several years regarding fraud, sure, but waste and abuse also. We focus a lot on internal controls, which I really think are it's just the foundation. It's the groundwork of making sure taxpayer dollars are spent well. I think it's really the maintenance part of government. So we focus a lot on internal controls, and Ms. Lyson, who is the Deputy Legislative Auditor for the Financial Audit Division, will especially talk about some of those. And then we also at OLA talk about program effectiveness. Are we doing things as well as we could be? Are we getting everything we want to be getting out of these programs? And that's the real focus of our Program Evaluation Division. And Ms. Jody Munson-Rodriguez, who's the Deputy Legislative Auditor for our Program Evaluation Division, will focus on some of those reports and some of that conversation more generally. So we're going to really speed through several reports that we have issued in the past couple of years. There are others that we're not including in this presentation today that also focus on findings and recommendations that we have found at DHS. But maybe if we can go to the next slide. Today, what we're really going to focus on is grants management, and then oversight of grantees, and then finally ending with recovery of overpayments. I will say that for one of the first reports I managed in 2007, not to date myself, was related to grants management. So this is something that we have been focused on for a long time at OLA, and the state has done a lot since 2007, but I think we still have ways to go here. So these are the three areas we're going to focus on today, talking a lot about the controls, the policies, and ways that we can do a better job. So first, just to talk briefly about grants management. So this is pulling from a 2023 report, and you should have a bunch of reports in your packet. This that I'm going to just start talking about briefly pulls from a 2023 program evaluation we conducted looking at the oversight of state-funded grants to nonprofit organizations generally. We did focus on 2 agencies, neither of which was DHS, but what we found is that really throughout a lot of our work, there have been pervasive non-compliance with grants management policies and requirements in recent years. And these are things that we have found across agencies. And at the back of this report, we have a list of our different recent reports that we had produced that had findings related to grants management. So that's also in the back of that 23 report. And really, the issues we found and continue to find span the whole life cycle of grants, from awarding the grant when you have conflict of interest issues to all the way to closing out the evaluation. So that means we've seen problems with, doing the financial reviews ahead of time to make sure a grantee is capable of handling the grant, getting the progress reports and the updates to make sure that the grantees are providing what we're hoping to get out of the grant, monitoring visits, financial reconciliation, all the way to the closeout. So these are things we have found, again, across state agencies. So at DHS in particular, from 2018 to 2022, they do a lot of grant making. In fact, they're really the biggest. So across those 5 years, they spent over $400 million in grant funding to nonprofit organizations, and that went to almost 600 different grantee organizations. So this is a big part of what DHS does. They have a lot of grants to manage. I'm sure the commissioner will talk more about that. So that might be why we have so many reports focused on their grants management. So to get into some of the details that we found specifically at DHS related to grant awarding, I'm going to kick it over to Ms. Rodriguez, who's going to dive a little deeper into one of the reports.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jody Munson Rodriguez, and I'm Deputy Legislative Auditor for OLA's Program Evaluation Division. As Ms. Randall noted, I'm just going to go over a couple of our key findings from a report that we put out last year. It's another one of the reports in your packet called Grant Award Processes. Within this report, we looked at certain grants management practices across state agencies, but we did focus in on a few questions with DHS. One of the reasons we focused on DHS is, as Ms. Randall noted, it is a very large grantor of state funds. Now, she also noted that we often look across the grant cycle when we are looking into grants management. In this report, as the name probably notes, we looked at that front end stage. So we were really focusing on what happens up until the point when a grant award is signed. Now, we did find a couple of issues within DHS's management, both with conflict of interest documentation and with pre-award financial reviews, and I'll go over those very quickly. So as you're probably aware, state agencies are required to follow policies established by the Department of Administration's Office of Grants Management, or OGM. That office has established a number of policies agencies must follow, one of which pertains to grant reviewers, so the individuals who review grant applications for competitive grants. They must sign a conflict of interest disclosure form identifying where any actual or potential conflicts of interest may exist. And then the state agency making the grant is responsible for maintaining those forms. What we found in our review of DHS's grants management practices was that of the 41 grant reviewers within the grants that we reviewed, for 10 of those, documentation of conflicts of interest was completely missing, or it was missing key elements such as signatures. Of the 30 reviewers for whom we had conflict of interest forms, we also noted issue with 6 of those. So these reviewers appear to have completed the forms without reviewing a relevant list of grant applicants prior to signing their conflict of interest forms. So it's difficult for us to understand how they had accurately declared whether they had conflicts of interest with those applicants if they did not know who all the applicants were. And then I'll give one more example of a finding that we had from that report. Again, I'll go over an OGM requirement. At the time of our review, I will note that this has since changed, but at the time of our review, the OGM required agencies to conduct pre-award financial reviews for awards of more than $25,000 for non-governmental grantees. We found that of the 57 grants within our review, there was no financial review documented for 20 of the grants. And for 5 of those grants, staff documented a review, but only after encumbering funds and awarding the grant. I'll note that these issues that we found, the 25 grants for which we found issues, represented about $11.5 million in grant funding. So I'm going to go back now to talk about a few of the factors that we found, again, in this oversight of state-funded grants to nonprofit organizations. Because we have found pervasive noncompliance in our reports in recent years, we wanted to see what are some of the factors that affect compliance. One of the issues that we found was resources. At the time we did our report, we found that the legislature had funded grants management activities very inconsistently across grant programs and state agencies, which we think has led to some of the inconsistency that we found in management activities. Another factor was training. OGM at the time provided some training on grants management policies, but it was ad hoc rather than on demand or on a set schedule. And agency staff are not required to take any specific training in order to complete their duties. Another issue we found had to do with grants management tools. So as you can imagine, with all the requirements around grants management, agencies are required to collect and store a great number of documents and other pieces of information. And we found that agencies used a variety of methods to document their activities. We did a survey of grants managers across grant-making state agency and found that about 40% used electronic systems for this type of data management, but that means that the other 60% were using all different other types of methods for collecting and storing this information. So for example, we noted that the Department of Education used a combination of email, online systems, electronic documents, and physical documents to manage grants. Another issue that I'll look at, in addition to the issues that I just talked about, there's the issue of accountability. So external oversight is an important thing to consider. Without mechanisms to hold agencies accountable to complying with policy, they may have fewer incentives to comply. So in terms of enforcement, we found that statutes provided little authority to enforce state agency compliance with OGM policies. Several entities, including OLA, had the authority to review compliance, but reviewing and reporting was generally the extent of the authority. In addition, it's difficult for the legislature to obtain comprehensive information about grant management, grant performance, because there is little information across grants and state agencies about management and performance activities. So I'll go briefly over some of the recommendations that we had in that report. We noted that the legislature should require the OGM to develop a grants management training program and for all grants management staff to complete that program. We also made recommendations about consistently funding grants management activities, external oversight, and developing recommendations for improving access to comprehensive statewide data. Now, to Senator McQuaid's question about activities that have happened since then, I do want to note that in 2023, the legislature did pass some changes that are responsive to some of these issues that we notified. I think a couple of the key ones were that law allowed agencies to retain a certain percentage of grant funding for administration. The law also directed the Department of Administration to assess the feasibility of implementing a statewide grants management system, which would better allow all entities to store and provide information about grant activities. And I can answer more questions about that later if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to add a couple of other changes maybe that have happened since we issued this report. OGM has developed, the Office of Grants Management, which is within admin, OGM, has developed grants management training for agency staff, but I don't believe that it is required. So you can be a grants manager and not have taken the training, but there is more training available. And just as a note, that was one of our recommendations, was to require all state agency grants management staff to complete a training program. The other piece regarding external oversight is the legislature did provide that the Commissioner of Admin has the authority to establish and enforce policy, but it is under discretionary powers. And so it is something where the department has the authority to do it, but it is not being required to do it. And so I don't know the extent to which they are. So I just wanted to point that out as a couple of additional actions that have happened since our report. And I guess I would also add one more thing, which is that the Office of Grants Management did receive more funding and has increased its staff. I believe it's gone from 4 FTE, I mean, it's a very small office, 4 FTE to now 12. So it's a big increase for them, but still, if you think about all the grants across the enterprise, it's still a very small office. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now we're going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about oversight now of grantees. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Lori Lyson. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for the Financial Audit Division. And we're going to go over one specific report that really talks about the oversight of a grant, and that is in the Senior Nutrition Program at the Department of Human Services. So the Senior Nutrition Program, it's a federal program that provides meals to individuals aged 60 or older, and those meals are delivered to either the participant's home or in a congregate setting, such as a senior center, a community center, or a restaurant. There are 4 entities that are involved in the administration and the delivery of these meals. There are 2 specifically that administer the program, and that is the Minnesota Board on Aging, which resides within the Department of Human Services. And then underneath them is 7 area agencies on aging. So those 2 entities are responsible for the administration of the actual program itself. They're not delivering the meals or making the meals. Then below those kind of 7 area agencies on aging, there are service providers. And in 2021, there's 17, or 2022, there are 17 service providers. And then underneath that, there's 131 subcontractors. So if the service providers themselves don't prepare and deliver the meal, then they contract that out to those subcontractors. So we're going to kind of talk about each of those 4 layers in a few of these findings. So in 2022, the program provided approximately 3.1 million meals to over 40,000 program participants. So our audit resulted in 9 findings that span almost all areas of grant oversight responsibility. So documentation, monitoring, contract oversight, the recertification of program participants, and then the quality of program participant data. So I'm going to highlight just a few of those findings on the following slides. This first finding is really looking at problems with the participant recertification. So the requirement is that participants must complete an application before receiving their first meal. And then at a minimum, the service providers, again, that's kind of that 3rd tier down in the grouping of 4, they must collect the names and dates of birth of these participants. That's required to be entered into then the participant database, which is housed at the state. And then the Minnesota Board on Aging requires that service providers then recertify those participants annually. So what we found here is that 296 out of the nearly 600 forms that we tested, service providers either did not perform that annual recertification, or those forms contain inaccurate data. And typically what we saw was in the names and the dates of birth. So our recommendations here are really that service providers should be recertifying these participants annually, and that the area agencies, that 2nd tier down, really needs to be providing monitoring over those service providers. our next finding really looks at the Minnesota Board on Aging and their conducting of monitoring over, again, the area agencies on aging. So Tier 1, looking over and providing the oversight over Tier 2. What's required here is their state policy. We talked about this again with the Office of Grants Management. They require that state agencies monitor grants over $50,000 by performing site visits and performing financial reconciliations. And those financial reconciliations should happen at least once before final payment is made, and then for advance payments. And then also for grants over $5,000, state agencies are required to complete a closeout evaluation. So what we found is that, oh, and I should say additionally too, that the Board on Aging also has an operations manual, and they require that there is an on-site visit that occurs at these area agencies at least once every other year. So that's in addition to the grants management policies. So here what we found was that the Board on Aging did not perform monitoring visits since 2017. And they did not perform financial reconciliations at all in 2022, and they could not provide documentation of when it last completed a financial reconciliation of these 7 area agencies. In addition, 5 of 7 of those area agencies also receive advance payments, and Board on Aging did not reconcile any of those advance payments. And then finally, they did not perform any closeout evaluations. So our recommendation here is that they simply need to be monitoring these area agencies, and then they should establish processes for general oversight over the area agencies. Then our next finding is really looking at now Tier 2, providing monitoring over Tier 3, right? So the area agencies providing the oversight over those service providers. So what's required here is that Board on Aging has a policy that requires that the area agencies conduct ongoing monitoring for 1/3 of the sites or 20 of the sites, whichever is less, annually. What we found is that for 6 of the 7 area agencies on aging, they either did not complete any monitoring visits, or they did complete they did not complete the required number of visits. So our recommendations here are pretty simple. They need to perform the required number of visits, and that we think that the Board of Aging should have effective controls in place, such as clear policies and procedures, and specifically the clear policies and procedures relates to the fact that there was some discrepancies over what constituted one site visit. So that's why we're talking about having clear policies and procedures. And then the final recommendation is really looking at providing proper oversight to ensure that the area agencies are performing the required number of site visits. Then we also looked at the overall quality of the participant data. So there is that participant database that is housed at the state. And we ended up surveying program participants to understand the quality and the accuracy of the participant data recorded in that database and to receive feedback on program services. So we mailed surveys to approximately 1,400 individuals, and we received responses back from 23% of those surveyed. The survey results do not allow us to conclude on noncompliance, but they can allow us to identify areas of increased risk of noncompliance. So what we found here is that 10% of the surveys that we sent were returned as undeliverable. 13% of survey respondents indicated they received a service other than what was recorded in the participant database. And 19% of the survey respondents indicated that they did not receive any meals from the senior nutrition program. Now here I'm just going to say a little bit further. In this case, participants, we recognize the fact that they may not remember if they received a few meals. However, for 6 of those individuals in the 19%, they claimed that they didn't receive any meals, but the database showed that they received between 112 to 660 meals in calendar year 2022. So these results likely occurred because the grantees did not recertify these participants as required. And our recommendation here is that the Board of Aging and the area agencies need to ensure that the data in the participant database is accurate and it's also reliable.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before we move on to the next and final report, and that's kind of going to shift gears. I just wanted to kind of step back for a moment and talk about why all of these things matter, right? Whether the participants whether their information is correct in a database, and whether the monitoring happened, and things like that. At the end of the day, all of these controls are in place to help ensure that the programs you all established in law and you all funded are actually reaching the people that you want them to reach. I mean, that's what you all want. I'm sure that's what everybody at the Department of Human Services wants. I'm sure that's what everybody at the Minnesota Board on Aging wants. I mean, I think we all have the shared goal of making sure that these programs are as effective as possible in serving the people for whom they're intended. And I think it's easy to feel like internal controls and auditor speak and all of that is a little nitpicky, right? A little, oh, the records weren't perfect, but all I care about was, did they get a hot meal, right? Because, of course, in the end of the day, that's all we all want is that. But these controls are in place for a reason, right? It's taxpayer dollars, and to make sure that they're spent correctly means that the right people are getting it. If we don't have these controls, then it could be that not as many people who need it are getting the services, that money is diverted or not being used effectively, or it's not being used as well as it could be. So, I think we all have a tendency, and this is no criticism of my team or me, like to glaze over a little bit when we talk about internal controls and auditing. I get it. Look at Senator Hoffman is yawning and can barely stay awake. But
I'm not yawning at Judy. It dawned on me. The air in here, all of a sudden my eyes are starting, so it's the sinus thing, so I'm not, please don't personalize my yawn there.
Sorry.
It's a medical yawn, so, I'm glad somebody's laughing at me.
Thank you,
Ms. Randall.
Mr. Chair. And no, I didn't mean to personalize. I just felt like you were reflecting what a lot of us feel, when we're talking about these things. But it's really just the foundation of making sure that the state money is used well. And I've been using this metaphor that everyone's sick of in my office, but I'm still going to use it. I'm thinking about the different layers of oversight OLA provides, and I thought about a barn with a horse inside of it, because it's a really tangible thing. And the internal controls and a lot of the work the financial auditors do is kind of like walking around the outside of the barn and checking the lock, and this window is kind of loose, let's make sure it closes well, and let's just, tighten up this thing, and this lock is broken, let's fix it, right? So it's like making sure things are secure, the maintenance, the cleaning out the gutters, that type of stuff. The program evaluation division is like, okay, we have a horse in here. Is this set up the best way for a horse? Oh, there's a bunch of chicken coops in here. Wait, that's not, we can get more horses in here if we get rid of the chicken coops. Or the ventilation is wrong. Or, let's get some better feed. We want race horses. Like, let's make them as good as they can. And then we have a special reviews unit that we're not discussing today, but that's like, oh my gosh, the farmhand comes to us and says, the back door was open, like we got a problem, one of the horses got out, right? And so all of those things are really different types of oversight, but you can see how they all build on each other, right? It's important to have the door locked properly so that the horse stays in and the feed stays in. And so anyways, you get the point. That's my metaphor. It works better in the ag committee, but we're gonna go with it. Anyways, I'm gonna stop, but this is kind of the point of all the internal controls and all of these nitpicky things. And so now we're gonna switch gears and talk about a totally different type of report, another financial audit that we released in December. So I'll kick it back to Ms. Lyson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will try to speed through this. Let me know if I need to cut something short. So we are going to talk about the recovery of overpayments. And what we're looking at here is really the medical services covered by medical assistance, but then reimbursed by the Department of Human Services on the fee-for-service basis. More specifically, we're looking at overpayment balances. Those are the result of payment adjustments, audits, errors. So something happens after the provider submits the claim, the Department of Human Services reimburses that claim, and then after that point in time, something is identified, right? An error, rate change, and that results in these overpayments. So what we typically will see is that those will be offset by active providers. So anytime an active provider submits additional claims, any overpayments are going to be offset. But if you're inactive, then there needs to be a way to recover those overpayments. That's what we're going to talk about here, is mainly focused on those inactive entities, medical providers. So the Department of Human Services really, they certified to Minnesota Management and Budget a provider debt balance of $51.7 million across approximately 2,500 providers. This balance is included in the state's financial statements. During our fiscal 23 financial statement work, we identified that the department did not appear to be collecting on this balance. As a result, we decided to conduct this performance audit, and we focused on specifically long-term care facilities that made up 62% of this population. And then we also looked at the 9 largest balances. Those largest balances ranged from 1.4 million to 5.4 million. So our audit really resulted in 4 findings. This first one is that the Department of Human Services has not attempted to recover over $40 million in outstanding overpayments to medical assistant providers. They did make an attempt to one provider in 2019 and then a collection of providers in 2015, but they have not made any attempts since that point in time. There are 2 divisions that are responsible for the identification and the collection. That is the program area that I'm going to call the healthcare administration area, and the finance division. I'm going to call them the program area and the finance division. So in this case, what we found is that the program area said that they were not aware that it was their responsibility, and the finance division stated that the system that is used, which is the Medicaid management system, they are not familiar with the system, so they do not assist with the collection of outstanding debt. Thus, we did not have any collection on this debt. Our recommendations here are recover the debt and improve internal controls. Our next finding here is that the department is planning to forgo recovery of outstanding debt that may still be recoverable. They kind of grouped these balances into 4 main areas: balances that are under $1,000, balances that are over 6 years old, providers that either had filed bankruptcy or are deceased, and then the remaining is those that they're planning to recover. This finding focuses on those first 2, balances over 1,000 or under 1,000 and over 6 years old. They have a policy that states that debt that is less than $25 can be written off. However, leadership in this case made a one-time exception that they weren't going to pursue recovery on this debt. And then for those balances over 6 years old, they claim that there's a 6-year statute of limitations to collect on that debt. However, we disagree that that statute applies to administrative actions here. In either case, we believe at the very least, these providers need to be notified that there's an outstanding balance, and that at the very least, a letter can be sent to try to recover those payments. Our recommendation here is that they need to recover debt in accordance with state law and its own policy, and they should work with the legislature to clarify its authority to recover outstanding debt. Our next finding, we just have 2 more left here, is that the department has not accurately reported its accounts receivable balance to Minnesota Management and Budget for inclusion in the state's financial statements since 2019. The state requires agencies to analyze their accounts receivable balance annually and estimate the portion of debt they do not expect to recoup. Here, the department does this by running a pre-program report to identify those accounts receivable, and then they use a preset formula to calculate the balance that they do not expect to recoup. However, the department has not updated or reassessed its calculation to determine the portion of debt that it does not expect to recoup since 2019. And that percentage has remained the same since, despite that balance growing consistently since 2016. The cause here is that the finance division said is the program area's responsibility, and the program area is stating that they were not aware that it was their responsibility. So before certifying this amount to Minnesota Management and Budget, the department did not consider or ask why the provider debt balance continued to grow, again, since 2016, why that percentage of the portion of debt it did not expect to recoup has not changed. Again, that stayed the same since 2019, and why older balances, some dating as far back as 2006, have not been considered or written off. So the result is the accounts receivable is overstated in the state's financial statements. Our recommendation here is accurately report that balance and then improve the internal controls. And then our last finding if I have time to go over that one. Okay. Is that the department was unable to provide adequate data to enable us to confirm the outstanding provider balances. So during our testing, we were not able to confirm balances for 20 of 59 providers that we tested. We saw variances that ranged from $43 to $152,000, and then 65% of the samples that we tested had inaccurate dates. And if you kind of go back to that previous slide where I talked about balances being outdated, some since 2006, because of this inaccurate kind of dates that we identified, we don't know how reliable that 2006 date is. So again, why did this happen? The claim data is only retained in the system for 3 years, and then after that 3-year period of time, they're really just collecting and saving summary level data. So the comments that would really talk about why adjustments were made, if you remember kind of on that first slide, if there was a rate adjustment, if there was an error identified, if there was an audit, that stuff isn't retained. So you can't see why those adjustments were being made. Additionally, the balances that we used for testing, they came from that pre-program report that I talked about on the previous slide. However, the department has not reviewed or verified that report for accuracy, and no one currently understands how that report was generated. The person who had generated that report is no longer with the Department of Human Services. So here we're saying that they need to retain adequate documentation, and they really need to ensure the accuracy of the information of that data in the system. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Randall, and I really appreciate your team's work, and you covered a lot in a very short period of time, and I'm sure there's a lot of work on your team's effort to put this information together, and I would encourage members to take a closer look at the in-depth reports. Ms. Randall, I just have one question. It seems like, and feel free to disagree with me, it seems like there are a lot of requirements in state law or in state agency policy. We just unfortunately aren't seeing the state agencies following their own policy or following state law. And Ms. Randall, I mean, do you have any ideas as to why the agencies are so bad at this, at kind of following the rules and guidelines that are laid out either internally in their own policy or in state statute?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. There are a lot of policies and laws and procedures and requirements already. I would agree. I'm sure the commissioner would agree. I know she talks about how many steps are required to do grants management. I also want to say that I think we all slip into talking about the executive branch and enterprise-wide, and I think that's a dangerous thing. I think different agencies and different programs, do different jobs. I think it's a huge enterprise, if you will, and I think of some other reports we've done recently where we have very few findings related to grants management. And so I think there is a proof of concept out there that it can be done, and it can be done well. I'll point you to a recent report we did on the Department of Agriculture, that they did a good job. We had a couple findings, but they were small, and they fixed them by the time we released our report. So there are a lot of requirements. It can be done. I think different agencies have different reasons why they struggle with compliance. Ms. Rodriguez talked about some of them, resources, which the legislature did in 23 provide a percentage of all grants. I think it's 10%, 5%. Okay, well, I can get you the exact number if you want. It's now an agency can keep it for administrative work. So you guys have addressed some of those resource constraints, although I don't know if that has solved agencies' issues. The training issues, the data sharing, that I think is a really big nut for the state to crack. As Ms. Rodriguez said, 40% of state agencies are using electronic grants management systems, so 60% aren't using an electronic system. I mean, we should just all pause and stop on that for a moment. Department of Education using a combination of, spreadsheets, emails, paper, that's insanity, right? I mean, nobody can do that, right? And so the legislature wisely funded admin to look into an enterprise-wide grants management system. I'd be super interested to see if, where that is, and is that feasible, and will that help, right? Why agencies aren't complying, I mean, this is something that I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. As I said, I think, there's a million different reasons, and hopefully DHS, when they come up, can enlighten you on where they've struggled and why. I think it's fair to take a look at the requirements and say, are all of them necessary? Do they all add value? I don't know. I haven't seen any that I don't think add value, but I'm certainly open to that conversation, and I'd love to be a part of it. Anyways, now I'm just really rambling. It's not an easy fix, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ms. Randall, and appreciate the recommendations you bring here today and the perspective you bring to this committee. If there are no questions, we'll move on to having the Department of Human Services come and testify, but thank you very much. Really appreciate your work. Welcome back to the committee, Commissioner Harpstead.
Thank you very much.
And just want to, personally thank you for your service to the state. And I think you have one of the hardest jobs in state government. And so just appreciate your work with members of this committee and your work with members of the public doing the really important work that the Department of Human Services does. And so just welcome back to this committee. And it's really appreciate you making time for this conversation today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Commissioner Harpstead wanted to also give you the opportunity to respond to any of the presentations that were made by the Office of the Legislative Auditor. If you wanted to provide any comments or response to that, I just wanted to give you that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. DHS takes the findings of our audits seriously, and we've been working to implement all recommendations provided by the OLA over the years. We have implemented the recommendations from the grants management audit that you heard about, including all of our conflict of interest forms and our pre-award risk assessments now filed away in our contracts integration system. As many of you have heard me say many times, our Behavioral Health Administration has gone from 20 grants a year 10 years ago to over 1,000 now. Please do pay attention to the governor's recommendation of our direct payments to counties and tribes for mental health. That would move appropriated money out to community faster and eliminate the repetitive process of over 120 RFP grants to our partners in the human services system. So take a look at that. We have recently come through the Medicaid provider credits, here called the Recovery of Overpayments audit, with the full intention of completing new streamlined annual processes of collecting what we can and writing off what we can't, complying with the OLA's recommendations. For those of you who didn't tune in to the Legislative Audit Commission, I need to repeat that once credits to Medicaid providers hit this particular account, our experience is that over 90% of them are out of business, making them largely uncollectible. And we are working to try to collect them and write off unrecoverable debt every year, keeping this account balance cleaned up. And to be clear, the Senior Nutrition Program in the Board on Aging is not part of DHS. They rent office space and use a few administrative services from us, but that organization is led by an executive director reporting to a board, not to the commissioner of the Department of Human Services.
Thank you, Commissioner, and appreciate that. And today wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the program integrity work that DHS is working on, currently has been working on, and any plans for the future. And specifically, would love to hear more about the work that's being done in the Office of Inspector General. So appreciate, and we'll hand it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair Rasmussen and Chair Hoffman and members of the committee. We've got our slides. The governor's position and mine is that Minnesota is a state committed to helping people. We're committed to providing services that improve the lives of Minnesotans. Fraud against these public programs is unacceptable. It's not a victimless crime, and it harms the same people we're trying to help with our services. Governor Walz also has a comprehensive package of budget and policy proposals to better prevent, detect, investigate, and punish fraud by strengthening investigation and enforcement authority, improving detection and oversight, and increasing criminal penalties. I want to talk a little bit about the scope of our Office of Inspector General's program integrity oversight. We have responsibility to oversee Medicaid fee-for-service and managed care organizations, the Child Care Assistance Program, the Great Start Compensation Support Payment Program, and recipients of funds. The OIG detects fraud, waste, abuse, and error and takes action when they find it. Cases result from tips and referrals and also data analysis. The OIG has a variety of tools to address fraud, waste, abuse, and error, such as warnings, stipulated provider agreements, monetary recoveries, fines, payment withholds, suspensions, and terminations. Just want to really distinguish, so we're all on the same page here, fraud is something that's intentional and criminal. Waste, abuse, and error are unintentional and not criminal. The DHS OIG has many tools to deal with fraud, waste, abuse, and error on its own. When there are indicators of criminal fraud, we can call one of many partners to consider pursuing prosecution, which we don't have the ability to do on our own. So we work with the Bureau of Criminal Affairs and the Department of Public Safety, the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit in the Attorney General's Office for Medicaid fraud, the Federal OIG, and Health and Human Services. My sentence is covered by a square. When we do this, we often need to step back from steps we might take so as to not hamper our partners' investigations. For example, allowing them to observe improper billing and the follow-up from that. Over 80% of the time, certainly the majority of time, when you hear about an investigation by the Attorney General's Office or the Federal OIG, DHS is involved and, in fact, referred the case to them. Media stories about search warrants, investigations, and prosecution for fraud often leave DHS's role out of the story, but we're behind the story the vast majority of the time. In 2022, when the Feeding Our Future story went public, DHS scrubbed every Medicaid dollar, every CCAP dollar, every grant known to DHS, and found no fraud in DHS perpetrated by the same people who perpetrated it in Feeding Our Future, except the folks we were already watching. Even so, we studied court records for credible allegations of fraud, stopped payment on 55 organizations, and disqualified 26 individuals from DHS services for 15 years. We've repeated that process as new indictments have come out since and will, of course, continue to. In 2023, we also submitted a proposal to the governor's budget, which passed into law, giving us greater freedom to take action when fraud is discovered in other state agencies of authority we had not had until that time. Also want to just talk about our overall fraud performance. Over the past 5.5 years, DHS has investigated 4,000 entities. We've stopped payment on 750 of them. While that may seem like a lot, it's only 0.5% of all the entities that DHS oversees. As we work together with the legislature to support ongoing services, we often add budget for licensing, background checks, et cetera, to services to make them work well for the community. We usually only add capacity for fraud investigation and action when a major fraud story hits the media. As a result, our OIG office is staffed as follows. Our Program Integrity Office with our fraud unit has 91 people, while our licensing, background checks, and the other services have 406 people. I've also mentioned a couple of you offline and wanted to show you a chart or two here about the growth of our licensed and unlicensed services. So over the last, from 2014 to 2025, you can see in the blue line, unlicensed organizations, and in the greens, licensed organizations. So in the older days, we had our licensing division and we focused mostly on licensed services. But in recent years, over the last 10, for example, we've seen a tremendous growth in unlicensed services. Unlicensed services are, well, for example, when you end up licensing a service, you have regulations they're required to follow. So when you go to check in on them and to investigate, you check A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, yes, no. Unlicensed services have much fuzzier requirements, not as clear as a licensed service. It's harder to investigate, and it just has a softer regulation around it, and so it's a tougher issue to do. And as you can see, the percentage of unlicensed services to licensed has grown a lot in the last 10 years. Next slide. The growth in total MA spending outpaces the growth in DHS staff, including for program integrity and compliance staff. As we're developing new innovative services together, we all need to be cognizant of the impact on program integrity, provider education, and compliance staff at DHS, and ensure appropriate guardrails are required in statute. So I would just say that over the last 10 years, together, we've decided to add many very valuable unlicensed services to the state of Minnesota to serve more and more Minnesotans. But together, we need to be sure we're building the compliance and oversight structure around those services, and we need some work there. The unlicensed services that have recently raised anxiety about fraud include our autism services, our SUD peer recovery services, and our housing stabilization services. One of those unlicensed services are autism services, also known as Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention, or EIDBI. This is an essential service, by the way, for dealing with the behavioral health crisis in Minnesota. It's a rapidly growing service as autism diagnoses have increased by 400% since the year 2000. Fast growth often makes folks anxious about the possibility of fraud. Over the past 2 months, investigators from DHS have done site visits on over 164 autism providers to see if we need to investigate any for fraud. Our preliminary study of what we've learned points more toward issues of administrative or compliance issues and not to widespread fraud. Still, we have referred 24 of those providers to investigation for fraud. We're now doing site visits on a second batch of providers and can report what we learn from that later. Some of the gaps, then, in our program integrity in our various services. The authority to share data with other agencies limits DHS's ability to collaborate across state government. This is an issue across all of state government for any of our partner organizations who are working to manage program integrity. The current law prohibits DHS from sharing information about payment withholds. State law does not include prohibition on incenting individuals to use a particular service by offering a kickback, as federal law does. Payment integrity clarification is needed to prevent inappropriate billing. Current surveillance tools are insufficient to detect complex fraud schemes. And as I've mentioned already, we have an increase in MA unlicensed services. Some solutions we have offered to the governor, who recently announced his anti-fraud package. First, to improve interagency data sharing. Authority to share data with other agencies limits DHS's ability to collaborate across state government. This would expand our ability to immediately suspend a program's license if a controlling individual, not just the license holder, is criminally charged with offenses such as fraud or theft somewhere else in state government. Would allow for a payment withhold when there's a criminal conviction related to fraud involving any other state or federal agency. Allows DHS to implement a payment withhold when a license is revoked or suspended by DHS or any other state or federal agency, and allowing us to issue a payment withhold when someone has a background study disqualification anywhere. Transparent payment withhold information. Current laws classify information about payment withholds as investigative data, so they can't be disclosed pursuant to the Minnesota Data Practices Act. This inhibits DHS's ability to be transparent that the agency is taking action to address certain concerns, either to legislators or to the general public. You often hear from us, sorry, we can't tell you, we're in the middle of an investigation. Prohibiting kickbacks. This would make it illegal to financially incentivize clients to choose one provider over another. This would make kickbacks a crime in state law and allow the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit at the Attorney General's office to pursue criminal charges. Improves outcomes by ensuring people have access to high-quality services that meet their needs. Curbing inappropriate billing. This proposal clarifies that providers can't double bill for the same service and charge SUD outpatient billing units, for example, to 15-minute units. This reduces the length of billing units to enhance person-centered, customizable care and leading to more accurate billing. Expanding and enhancing surveillance tools. This proposal expands our surveillance tools to improve our ability to detect and address complex fraud schemes, establishes proactive approach to fraud detection and prevention using modern technology, including AI. You've all heard about how AI can handle tons and tons of data. Our Medicaid team is particularly eager to see this one because they have tons and tons of data. And if they could scour that data for patterns, investing in case management technology to support data storage, processing and analytics would create an ability for fraud analytics to be put together in our OIG unit and to find the patterns that we can find in our data to look for possible fraud, not requiring a physical visit. If we can just look at the data more and then triage and prioritize our visits. A provisional licensing for EIDBI. We've talked to our legislative chairs and talked about the possibility of moving in the direction of licensing EIDBI because of the concerns that have been raised about it. It would require us to develop a provisional license by July of 2025, specifying that DHS has maltreatment investigative authority for EIDBI, providing resources to revalidate agencies every 3 years instead of every 5, as our unlicensed services do now, requiring background studies that are cleared prior to enrollment, implementing process to assess claims before payments to ensure medical necessity. Full licensure requires legislative authorization, and in the meantime, DHS can engage with people, advocates, and providers to finalize the standards to move toward licensure. Additional tools, clarifying the laws to ensure DHS can collect from surety bond companies, providing resources for more fraud investigators and provider enrollment screening and revalidation staff to prevent and detect errors in proper billing and fraud. 4 additional oversight specialists are necessary to coordinate with and audit the MCO's program integrity and compliance activities, and 3 additional staff to support housing stabilization services, eligibility and ongoing provider training, technical assistance, and community engagement. So as I've said, in general, we've seen a growth in our services, as we always do. We've seen a particular growth in unlicensed services, which have fuzzier regulation and are somewhat harder for us to monitor. And so we need to work together to build the oversight structure around those services that have been growing so that we've got the ability to keep them well in order. I wanted to mention stopping payment for a moment because some people have asked us, why don't we stop payment as soon as we see something? In recent years, I just want to use this example. DHS has had to take action against one very large statewide provider serving hundreds of people in residential services for taking shortcuts and not following way too many rules, such as home safety and appropriate supervision. We knew the provider was looking to sell its organization to another larger one. We added investigative visits to be sure people were properly and safely cared for while staying updated on the sale process. In the end, a new provider took over, cleaning up all the problems, and hundreds of people did not lose their housing, which is why we didn't say, oh my gosh, look at this, and stop payment day 1. Next slide. If we had stopped payment immediately, hundreds of people would have been without housing, and the final financial outcome for the state would have been roughly the same. In other, smaller cases, we're often asked by our state and federal partners not to stop payments, as we mentioned earlier, so as to not interfere with their investigations. In summary, we've done 4,000 investigations in the past 5.5 years and stopped payment to 750 entities, or 0.5% of the entities we oversee. We found no fraud in DHS from feeding our future indicted parties, but still stopped payments and disqualified individuals. We've done site visits to 164 autism providers and found primarily compliance issues, but still referred 24 to fraud investigations. And we've submitted a robust list of proposals to the governor's anti-fraud package to further invest in new tools and our ability to root out and deal with fraud. Because as I have said from the beginning, there is nothing more important for DHS than to be trustworthy to the people of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Harpstead, and I very much appreciate the solutions that you and your team are bringing forward, and I think you'll find bipartisan interest, especially on the ones you've talked about, the Department of Human Services, on implementing that to make sure that we're giving DHS and other government entities the tools they need to go after bad actors who are either stealing state dollars or wasting them or using them inappropriately. Commissioner Sharp, I guess I wanted to ask, I remember back, I think it was when I was serving in the House, we talked about Operation Swiss Watch. And, this is something that is not, this topic is not necessarily something that's new to the human services space here in Minnesota. And I think, I have a lot of constituents who, open up the newspaper and they read about $30 million in overbilling and SUD treatment. They read about PCA fraud. They're looking at FBI raiding autism centers, and they just kind of ask the question of what's going on and why hasn't this been fixed? It just seems like it's been this serial issue within the human services space in Minnesota. We've even had federal partners kind of call out Minnesota being perhaps even an outlier when it comes to different public services fraud. And Commissioner, just wanted to ask if you had any thoughts on why this is something that it just seems like we're continuing to talk about year after year, and we haven't been able to get to the bottom of it yet.
Well, one reason is that's why they call it human services. We would always expect to have to deal with some measure of fraud. And it would be a really interesting conversation to be part of, to think about what's an appropriate level? How much should we spend? What is our goal to get the number down to? Because we would have to spend taxpayer dollars to protect taxpayer dollars. And what's the appropriate level of oversight and examination of fraud? I have to say, in my 5.5 years here in the Department of Human Services, many of the media pieces we read are where someone thinks there might be fraud, or heard there could be fraud, or had some names that were connected with feeding our future, so there must be fraud. And they don't always match with what we discover when we literally go out and do the work and figure out who needs to be indicted for fraud. And so we do have to take that much into consideration. Because there's a lot of rumors of fraud more than there is actual fraud. And then I would say that I've noticed this trend, which I've mentioned to you before, and we were talking about today, about the growth of our unlicensed services. And perhaps all of us together have not kept up with building the fraud machine around that to be sure that we're on top of things. So that's something that needs attention, and this is a good year to do it with the fraud package out and putting together additional abilities. I've also mentioned the many times that we refer to our partners to pursue prosecution for criminal fraud, and then we're silenced by the law to not tell you that we're doing it. And so there have been many times when people think that the federal government found this out and we didn't. And that's been very frustrating. We've even had a time once when I was on the phone with our federal partners and the Attorney General, and we all agreed to say that we were all engaged in the process. We did, and the newspaper erased the sentence about DHS. And so people don't know what we're engaged in and how we're staying on top of this to protect their taxpayer dollars, because we don't get the credit for it. So that's frustrating. And then we have been contacting our federal partners since the comments were made in the press about particular focus on fraud in Minnesota, to ask them exactly what they were talking about, and is there something we can follow through on and go look for that we don't know about, and we haven't heard anything from them about where we can go take care of something that they see happening in Minnesota. So that's been frustrating.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, one other question I had is, when we look at the Office of the Inspector General within DHS, I was wondering if you could talk about the current status and leadership. I understand that office is vacant currently, and just who's leading that work, and when do you see there being a permanent Inspector General in that office?
Yeah, so our Inspector General has taken a new position in our General Counsel's office, and we have a couple of us from my Office of the Commissioner that are staying focused on that department and supporting their work for now. We've posted the position, and we're looking for the replacement now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any member questions? Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Chair. Thanks for your report, Commissioner. Obviously, we all are concerned about fraud because we want to help the people that need it. And when we waste dollars in different areas, then they don't do it. Yeah, I appreciate you referencing the feds making that statement, and I know how things show up in the paper, but that's the way it is. I do have a list of documented fraud cases here in Minnesota from 2019 to 2025. It does include Feeding Our Future. It's about $552,397 between 2019 and 2025. Now, I did a radio program before session started with Senator Mark Coran. He said it's really closer to $1 billion, okay? And he's not here, but that's what he made statements on the radio program. I do have some information. I've got 3 quick questions, actually, and they were given to me by someone very familiar with DHS, okay, to the internal workings. And here's their statement. I'll make the statement. It might sound like an allegation, but I want you to respond to those and give you a chance to respond, okay? At DHS, it appears once a nonprofit has been set up and approved for payment in the DHS system, the DHS payment system is on autopilot and pays nonprofit invoicing without review. He goes on to say, what system is in place at DHS, IT or accounting, to determine if the invoicing being submitted by the nonprofit for payment is legitimate? So he's basically saying payments are just set out on autopilot. So, Commissioner, if you'd like to respond to that.
Thank you, Senator Green. Commissioner Harpstead or anyone on your team that you'd like to have respond to that?
If I could have our CFO come up and comment about that.
Yes, happy to. Give him a moment. Mr. Greenman, welcome to the committee. Would you please introduce yourself and then let me know if you need Senator Gruenhagen to restate anything or if you're ready to respond.
Mr. Chair, Senator Rasmussen, thank you. My name is Dave Greenman. I'm the CFO of the Department of Human Services. I did hear the question. Senator Gruenhagen, when the department enters into a grant contract with a nonprofit, we have staff throughout the agency in each of the administrations who work. The titles may be changed by administration, but they're grant managers essentially. And it's their job to, when we get a request for payment, to review the claim and ensure that it's for eligible services, that the funds are there, it's compliant with the contract, and then they have to actually sign off on the invoice in order for that to be sent to the financial operations area, which then makes the payment. So those payments don't go out without somebody checking them to make sure that they're accurate. And, you know, I guess the other thing I would say is, as the Commissioner said, this is a human services department. There are mistakes that are made occasionally, but there are safeguards in place as well to correct those things.
Thank you, Mr. Greenman. Senator Gruenhagen, do you have any follow-up?
Yeah, I got 2 more follow-up questions.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks for that response. So basically, again, the statement from somebody very familiar with DHS is that many of these payments are set on autopilot without, to nonprofits, without much review. The next question is earned value management, which is an IT tool, analysis being done by DHS on these activities? He goes on to say there are no financial controls in place to stop these payments. Once approved, the system just pays and no one at DHS is checking, and there is no IT or accounting system in place to determine if the invoicing being sent for payment is legitimate. This has already cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And I did find it interesting that his questions kind of closely parallel the OLA report. And so is there an earned value management system in place that does analysis to help locate and find fraud?
Mr. Greenman.
Senator, Chairman Rasmussen and Senator Gruenhagen, I'm not familiar with the term earned value management. I think there's a lot of As the Commissioner mentioned in her overview of the governor's package, as fraud has gotten more complex, as fraudsters have tools and their methods have gotten more complex, we've had to get more complex in the way we address and manage those instances or those attempts at fraud. The department has quite a number of data analytics work that we do. We do have an electronic grants management system. We had the system that I mentioned earlier, or the processes earlier, where invoices are reviewed before they're paid by a human who's familiar with the grant program. So I don't exactly know what that tool is. I'd be happy to look into it further if that would be helpful. I'm not an IT guy, so I'm sure there are people back at DHS who understand that term and could help maybe answer that.
Okay.
May I?
Commissioner Armstead?
Yeah, Chair Rasmussen and Senator Grunhagen, and I mentioned the AI potential analytical tools that we're looking for from the governor's anti-fraud package, and Dave mentioned them too. We have so much data, especially in our Medicaid program, that our Medicaid team would love to have those tools on board at DHS because AI and tools like that can pour through tons and tons of data these days, find patterns, and develop a list of places where we ought to look more closely. And we would love to have that tool to be able to do more of that as we go along. But as our CFO here has stated, we have people that do review our bills before we pay them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Gruenhagen, do you have a
Yep,
follow-up?
I have follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Yeah, you probably could pay for the system by the savings it would produce. Okay, it's just a suggestion. It was also stated at this committee that about 60%, I think if I got that right, 60% of agencies use some type of technology to detect fraud, but that DHS doesn't, okay? So I think it's a big step in the right direction. Again, I won't read everything he said, but he said unless you implement some type of earned value management or something similar, we're just going to be back here another year with more waste, fraud, and abuse, okay? So, the last question is, does DHS do any FBI background check, such as fingerprinting, and a background check on these nonprofit vendors prior to granting approval of payment? And, you know, I sell mutual funds, and even if I sell a $100 mutual fund, I have to go in to the local law enforcement, get fingerprinted, and a picture of me made, okay? Now, the reason this is important, and this is just a recent article, January 10th, 2025, a Minnesota felon was just charged by the Minnesota Attorney General in a $7.3 million fraudulent Medicaid billing scheme. So this felon, which could have been found relatively easy, milked the system in Minnesota for $7.3 million before he was discovered. And yet if we had fingerprinting and background checks, this could have been discovered and stopped before it started. Appreciate your response. If you see implementing something like this would be of value.
Chair
Commissioner
Rasmussen,
Harpsett.
thank you, and Senator Grunhagen. Of course, we do extensive background checks and fingerprinting of the providers that we pay our taxpayer dollars to. We always have. In fact, we've had more complaints in recent years about how long it takes to get the background check to clear so that people can hire employees. And so, yes, we do extensive background checks and fingerprinting of people before we allow ourselves to pay them our funds.
Follow-up?
Thank you, Commissioner. And Senator Gruenhagen,
It'll
we
be-
do have a few other members
Yep.
who have some questions as well.
I'm just about done. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you know, then how did, if you do background checks and you do fingerprinting, and they even take my picture to sell a $100 mutual fund, just in case I leave the state, I suppose. But how did this felon, an existing felon, be able to milk the system for $7.3 million of Medicaid fraud? How did that happen if we're doing background checks?
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Sorry, Chair Rasmussen and Senator Grunhagen. You know, the background check, the fingerprint is just one of the things that we can do as we get started. As you've heard, we also check our bills before we pay them, and then still people find ways to scam the system, and that happens. And so really ask you to take a serious look at the governor's anti-fraud package to give us more tools, the same kind of things in general that you're talking about, so that we can do an even better job. Our budget's getting even bigger all the time. The number of grants are getting more all the time, as we've said. The grant requirements are getting more all the time. And we'll take all the tools we can get to sift through all this data and find things that we should be looking into and focusing on. And I'm particularly interested in the data analytics that would allow us to let a machine examine all the data and point to the areas we might be wanting to look, instead of just being able to take tips and go out on visits. It would really make a big difference in our work.
Just a final comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think, members, I think a lot
Senator
of.
Gruenhagen, we're going to go to Senator Mohammed, and we can continue and come back to you.
Okay, I'm just going to make a final comment, okay?
Stand time, yeah.
Is
Senator
that
Gruenhagen.
I think a few small steps would end about 90% of this fraud, okay? And this is someone who is very familiar with the DHS processes over a series of years. Thank you.
Senator Mohammed.
Thank you, Chair Rasmussen. I actually have a question that maybe 2 or 3, but one that came to my mind, sort of following what Senator Gruenhagen said, which I think is really important. He made a point that said there was, I think, an individual who had frauded one of the agencies $190 million, and our state attorney's office was able to catch that fraud. And I think it's a really important point, because I think the work that we did last session, 2023, in funding the state attorney's office is doing the work. So I wanted to ask you how you're able to work with our state, with both our federal agencies and the state attorney's office to make sure that we do catch the folks who are finding the loopholes within our systems.
Commissioner Harpstead.
Yes, Chair Rasmussen and Senator Mohammed. As I mentioned, at least 80% of the time when you hear about an investigation of DHS services by the Attorney General's office here or by the federal government, we were the ones who referred the case to them. So the Attorney General does our investigative and prosecutorial work for us, and so does the federal government. Those two organizations can also get tips from the public and have other sources that sometimes come to them with information, but the vast majority of the time, the Department of Human Services has asked them to take the case for us.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Mohammed, any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. My follow-up is, what can the legislature do to help your agency and other agencies to make sure that we do, in the future, do our best to make sure that we're preventing from these things from happening?
Commissioner.
Yes, Chair Rasmussen and Senator Mohammed, pass that anti-fraud package. It's exactly what we need. The governor asked all of us to come up with the things that would help our agencies do a better job. And some of our folks pulled things out that they'd wanted to do for a long time and got it into that package. And it's the kinds of things that we would rate as the #1 things that need to happen next to improve our oversight.
Thank you. And I would say that we also invited the Medicaid fraud team from the Attorney General's office to join us today. They were unavailable, but I hope that we're able to welcome them back to the committee at a future date to talk about the important work they do in conjunction with DHS. Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Harpstead, this is your last chance to sit here and talk about fraud, I think. I'm not sure if you're coming back next week or not, but you have some future ahead. And after all this, you've been through a lot of adventures, you know, and you and I together. And your successor will face these kinds of reports, and your predecessor did. And then I've been here 26 years in office, and there's a stack of things we've talked about that seem to keep coming up. And you know, perhaps the governor's plan is a magic bullet. I was disappointed to hear him comment that he didn't have the tools to chase down some of these people. I think Senator Gruenhagen and others are on track that, you know, I don't doubt your will. I do have concerns about the challenges all the way filtering through. To your successor, I will tell them that you can't get a background check and a fingerprint thing to get people to work, and most of those people are legit. And we've tried to help that. So we're straining on the people that are probably fine, and then the malefactors kind of get overlooked, and that's a challenge. And I wish the governor didn't say we didn't have enough tools. And so it's like got to rely on the federal attorney to do that, U.S. attorney. And I think we have the tools. We have a attorney general, we've got a department who cares. And so I hope that, that we're successful. But I do wish one thing for you, that you wouldn't use the word fuzzy describing some of the requirements around some of these vendors, which I think is part of the problem. And I think that a lot of the oversight that could go forward is simply just like, gee, it seems like a lot. You know, with the autism, with this EIDBI money, gee, it's a lot. I wonder why. I wonder, what's happening in CADI. And internally, we discuss, and I don't even expect you to really reply much, but this is a never-ending thing. And now as we face a budget time that's going to be very lean, I would believe a lot of the money that is being taken by fuzzy providers is maybe not very well spent, and we've had those discussions. And so we've had so many discussions about this, and I know you've tried really hard, and you did the Swish Watch thing, and there's certainly many things that are working better with grants and so on that will be part of your legacy. But the discussion goes forward. But I hope that as we work as a bipartisan committee and bicameral, if they ever get going over there, that we can make sure that the money that we are spending goes to who needs it in the most efficient way, using providers who are substantial and good, and because many of those people are being not handled, and this is not the hospital committee, but hospitals, nursing homes, home care, all that. So anyway, but I just wanted to also just thank you for your service and the effort you put in, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, and Godspeed in the next step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here and having this deep conversation. I think I'm just going to put this for our committee, because as we go through the budgeting process, I think we run into this tension sometimes where we get to the end of session and we're talking about our budgets and we're looking at how much of this is going to go to an agency versus how much is going to go to the thing. And we're a part-time legislature, so we are not a co-equal branch of government to the executive branch or the judicial branch, which I think hinders our ability to provide oversight. So that's my personal opinion. But I do want us to, I just want to be really, I want to be really educated on, are you missing people to do this? Are you missing good technology to do this? Like what are some of the, I see some of the solutions on these boxes here, but like give me a little, like if we had we could catch it before we have to prosecute someone, right? I would like to get us to a place where we're not prosecuting people for fraud, but we're, having good things in place that aren't onerous, that are staffed appropriately, that are 21st century technology, that are just appropriate levels to administer, because we're relying on nonprofits to fulfill the role that government's not doing, right? And so if we're going to do that, we at least need to fulfill the oversight part.
Commissioner.
Chair Rasmussen and Senator McQuaid, first, I just want to repeat that 2 years ago, we scrubbed every Medicaid dollar, every CCAP dollar, and every grant known to DHS and found no fraud in DHS perpetrated by the people who perpetrated it in Feeding Our Future. So we're doing something right at a base level. And I believe my working theory is that our Office of the Inspector General is out there. They're out there visiting. They're out there overlooking the services that we provide, and people know it. And they didn't dare try to do that in our licensed or unlicensed services. They saw that bolus of money that came in during the pandemic and saw an opportunity, but don't see it on the ongoing service side. So we are already providing oversight and avoiding fraud in many ways. And the public is asking, what more can we do? And so what more we can do is in that fraud package. A couple of my favorite pieces in that is, as you've heard me say, is the data analytic opportunity to just scrub through all kinds of data, because we've got lots of it, to tell us where to look. And yes, we need more people for sure, more investigators in the department.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My last question was about the Office of Inspector, the U.S. Department of Health said that our Office of Inspector General, our Medicaid fraud control unit that you brought up, Mr. Chair, had the most fraud convictions among similarly sized operations in other states. If I'm reading that, is that good because we're finding them?
Commissioner.
Chair Rasmussen and Senator May Quaid. I have found it ironic in the last year that when we do find fraud somewhere and we announce it, I could imagine people saying, good, they're on top of fraud. What they say is, see, I told you there's fraud. So there's always two sides to the story on this one. And it's just a tricky conversation to have. It's never enough, and it's, so when we are tough on fraud, it sounds like, oh, good, it's too bad because there's fraud. And so it's really hard to please the public on this one, and it's easy to bring up the stories and get people stirred up about it. And we want to be trustworthy to the people of Minnesota. So it's clearly a moment in our history where I believe we need to take some more steps, add some more resources, and add to our ability to oversee taxpayer dollars. And I'm proud of what we've done so far, and it's time for more.
May I ask one more question?
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your ongoing patience with this side of the table. The last question is going back to one of your first slides. You talked about fraud is intentional and criminal, and waste and abuse is unintentional, not criminal. I'm pretty sure that, like, misusing public funds is a crime. Is there a big differentiation between like the literal definition of fraud and there's other places where we could have waste or like unintentional? I guess what I'm looking for is like we don't have good compliance, or is that a whole set of things? And if you were going to separate them out, what are we, like percentages, what are we looking at more of?
Commissioner.
Chair Rasmussen and Senator May Quaid, that's a fascinating question, and I'd have to think about that more, I think, to give you a really good answer. But off the top of my head, I would also say that one piece we need, and that we've done a lot more of in recent years in DHS, is training of our providers. When there was concern raised about fraud in PCA services a few years ago, we developed a Steps to Success education program, and we expected everyone to take it if they were going to bill Medicaid for PCA services, and that's made a difference. We would like to do more of that. We've added technical assistance people in several of our departments, and they've been very helpful in teaching providers how to do things correctly. In our 164 visits to EIDBI providers, I mentioned that we saw more administrative and compliance issues than we saw what you would call widespread fraud. And so we think it's people making errors and people maybe wasting money or abusing money, but not intentionally, but because it's a complicated process. Our services are complicated, our billing is complicated, and people are making mistakes. And so the more we can work with our providers to help people understand how to do things well and then bill our services, we'll all be better off for that too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Rucky, do you have one quick question before we move on to the next testifiers?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I was going to make these kind of a comment/question, and they, because of the commissioner's short time left with us, a lot of this will be passed on to whoever follows. But one of the questions, and if this was asked previously when I had to step out, I apologize, but in the department or the agency, how many people are still working remote? I think that is a big problem too, is getting people back into the office, having continuity in it. That would be the first thing I had. The second is, as far as the agency goes, and we're talking about, even in the third piece, a fraud package needing more people, but how many current job openings or positions do we have that are open? I think you probably still have a lot there. I might be wrong. But that kind of rolled into the fraud package that's being proposed now from governor's budget. And we have had these conversations ongoing. This is my 9th year of sitting around this table. It's great to be talking about it, but why now and not why didn't we do it before type thing? So hindsight's always 20/20, but how can we move these forward so that someday we can have less of these conversations? But that's probably more of a comment because I know by our schedule we need to move on. But thank you.
Thank you, Senator Utke. Commissioner, any quick
Just
response?
very quickly, if I could, Chair Rasmussen and Senator Utke, all of the agencies of state government were recently asked for the data you are asking about remote work and open positions, and we can provide that to you after this meeting.
Thank you. And yeah, Commissioner Harps, it'd be great to get that information to the committee as well. So thank you for providing that. Up next, we have Mr. Freeman. Want to approach and introduce yourself to the committee? Mr. Freeman, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Freeman, I'm the Human Service Policy Analyst for the Association of Minnesota Counties and the Executive Director for the Minnesota Association of County Social Service Administrators, or the County Human Service Directors across the state. And Mr. Chair, thank you. Appreciate the invitation today to talk a little bit about what the county's role is in this work and some of the ideas that may be coming from our membership about addressing or reducing fraud. As the department has outlined, identifying, monitoring, and investigating fraud is an intensive process. And like everyone, counties are challenged in recruiting and retaining staff to carry out the important regular caseloads that they're doing to best serve families, let alone hold time and space to identify fraudulent trends. But counties have a strong desire to be a partner in this work. We deliver these programs and we hold true to the importance of spending federal, state, and local dollars on those who it's intended and who it is best spent. So thank you for the chance to speak to that. Counties play that important role in fraud prevention, and we're seeing our work on that back end of that service and working with individuals every day. I know you were looking at possibly having a county attorney to speak to that. Do you want me to speak more to that role in fraud investigation, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Freeman, if it's all right, we might move on to Crystal LaVisca and Michelle Dean to provide more of the county perspective, unless there's anything else you'd like to provide.
I would just say, again, really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We know that we're seeing in Minnesota one of the higher trends in financial or other county worker reporting regarding fraud. A lot of our work and investigation work may be more in Chair Wickland's or DCYF's issue area, but are committed to putting resources and doing those investigations, and my colleague can speak more to the specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And with that, we have Ms. Crystal LaVisca joining us over Zoom. If you would please unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the committee and proceed with your testimony, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairs Rasmussen and Hoffman, members of the committee. My name is Crystal LaVisca, and I'm the Financial Assistance Manager for Western Prairie Human Services. And I'm here today representing MAXA, the Minnesota Association of County Social Services Administrators. Thank you for inviting us. To pick up where Matt left off, I'd like to share 3 other ideas for your consideration. Number 2, program simplification for cash assistance programs to reduce waste, abuse, and error. You have heard counties talk about the need for simplification for many years. Public assistance programs like food and cash assistance have very complex policies, which make them very vulnerable to waste, abuse, and error. County partners are advised to inform recipients of public assistance to hang their approval notices on their refrigerators so they know when and what to report. It's just that complex. The state has already done some work to align eligibility requirements, but looking at common tools for even one area, such as income determination, could help in discrepancies in income reporting. Additionally, policy simplification and alignment of duties so that all parties involved know their responsibilities, from the community providers to county eligibility workers to fraud investigators and to the county attorneys. Number 3, technology investments to prevent intentionally criminally acting members from accessing ongoing assistance. It is no secret that the technology framework for a vast majority of our human services programs is functioning off technology as old as our most esteemed viewers today. Outdated, glitchy, unreliable technology that doesn't allow our various programs to talk to each other is just not going to help us identify and track fraud. An example of this is MEX. It is a public-facing platform, meaning that anyone can create a login and apply for healthcare through the marketplace. This is great for public access to programs, but it comes with a barrier. No matter how much work goes into fraud investigation and program integrity, a person can re-enroll under a new login. System limitations prevent Minnesota and counties from ensuring that those convicted of fraud remain from accessing the program. Number 4, bolster local funding for fraud investigations. Currently, the state is redistributing our funding, so future funding is not known exactly, but we anticipate there may be cuts in some counties. Counties have many metrics in place to show cost effectiveness, but because we are delivering services, the real cost effectiveness is realized at the state level. In fiscal year 24, for every dollar spent on fraud prevention operational costs, the program returned a statewide average of $6.41. As the financial benefit is primarily at the state level, it is very difficult for any human services agency to ask their county board to supplement grant funding with local property tax dollars when their state-funded fraud prevention and investigation staffing and resources are minimal. Our boards know that funding fraud prevention is expected as part of common good. However, funding varies wildly from county to county. We would encourage policymakers to consider adequate support for local fraud investigations, as well as rebasing methods that don't include cutting programs based on ROI that is difficult to prove at the county level. Again, thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Zavinska. I really appreciate the ideas and solutions that you brought to this committee today. We'll go next to Ms. Michelle Eldine, Otter Tail County Attorney. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Senators. Michelle Eldine, I'm the Otter Tail County Attorney. I've been in this position since 2018, but I've been in the office since 1998, and I have personally, either as county attorney managing a fraud program here or as an assistant in my previous role, prosecuted cases and worked with the Human Service Agency for that entire period of time. I've seen the changes with how we do fraud, how we work with the social workers and the rules and that. And so I guess I was asked today to specifically kind of talk about the role or how we work with fraud, and then specifically what, if anything, you as senators could do or the legislators could do to help us. And so I've got a few ideas, I guess, with that. But specifically, I would say as far as when we're talking about dollars, of course, one of the biggest areas is medical assistance, where we're seeing a lot, at least in Otter Tail County as well. That's where our dollars are, where our recoupment is the highest. Certainly the other benefits are important too, but the dollars are where medical assistance is. And I bring that up because I believe, Mr. Chair, that the changes have been significant in that area where it's been difficult, or it made it more difficult for the work to be done and for us to prosecute cases or to collect on the overissuance of benefits in the wrong hands. And specifically, a couple of the items I would note, I've got a few of them, which is one, the application itself is different than the other benefits. So in other words, it's all online. There's no even phone call. An applicant can go online, and I think it's a true disservice to the clients. One of the senators, and I did not catch which one was speaking regarding, kind of the back to work or the in-office type setting. And I think with that, obviously, we need workers in person to be able to meet with the individual applicants in person as well. But I think that is a disservice to have some of these individuals trying to walk through these applications. And I think any one of you should look at what they are. I would say one of the things to do is take a look at the application itself. It's not easy to understand at portions, and there's certainly sections that can be skipped. And so if there was a worker there to explain, I think all aspects of the application from our fraud individuals here would say they need to be filled out. It's certainly some of the prompts, if you skip some, are necessary to understand, I think, all of it as a whole. And so that's one of the things, and certainly then to be able to talk to that person and see if there's an understanding of the things they're signing off on. And so that's something we don't understand why, other than maybe the ease of it or during COVID to make it easier for applicants, but certainly in the other ones, it's either an in-person interview regarding the application or, as I understand, a call is made, and that's not happening there. And then one of the bigger things we're seeing where it makes it very difficult to stop the abuse or catch it before there's massive dollars going to the wrong hands is the auto renewals it's automatic. And so we would suggest that you take a look at where there could be a mandatory renewal that's done annually, and that if there is the lack of reporting or following through with that, then the benefits are closed off in those cases, which it's not happening now. And so those are some areas we've seen huge losses. Specifically right now, I have one case where I'll be handling where it's $500,000 or more dollars, and that's in Otter Tail County alone. So I just look at that. If I have a case with $500,000 or more with benefits, where in this case, the family moved to Florida, we had nobody knows, nobody catches it for over a year and a half. Those are the kind of dollars, I think, where there isn't that process happening in person, or the awareness or the ability to talk to the individuals directly is causing some of the abuse we see. And so other than the automatic renewals going away, the applications online, I think were some of the main issues. I think generally the rules itself, again, Mr. Chair, I would ask that you look at the rules and kind of the difficulties where DHS is interpreting the federal guidance. And so where we often get into trouble with the workers, and that is they're always going back to DHS to figure out interpretations because the rules have constantly changed. And I think I've heard others talk about how difficult that is. A lot of the workers that are doing this work and trying to identify fraud, right now, a lot of I think counties are seeing mass turnover, right? So you're talking about maybe a worker that's been there, in our case, the longest 2 years. You barely know those worlds sometimes for 2 years. The rules are complicated, they take time, and so there's a lot of training involved, and that's been difficult. So then to think that fraud, and that is on their forefront, is difficult for them to focus on that when they haven't been in the role very long. So I think that's another issue, is the rules itself. But specifically, some of the federal guidance that's come down, I'll give you an example. As far as the benefits itself, when it comes to collecting. So it used to be Minnesota previously interpreted the rules where there were overpayments that we could cite them and collect them, with processes where you'd work with the applicant, there may be an agreement to pay it back. Now, under the federal interpretation by DHS and CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medical Services, where that guidance comes from, would tell us that we now need to go to a civil judgment or a criminal conviction in order to collect overpayments. So we are now having to, charge cases, look at going after judgments and getting them on individual records of these individuals that are being overissued before we can actually collect the dollars that we used to collect. So Mr. Chair, just give you a couple examples of the things I've seen in the last 20, 30 years that have made it more difficult to actually do the fraud work that we do. I certainly can go more. I think it's just so broad I could go on forever, but I think I tried to limit it to some of the easiest examples we could give, and I'll open it maybe up for questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Aldine, and I appreciate the concrete examples and solutions that you and the counties are bringing forward, and they're a really important partner, not only in our human services work, but also in identifying, preventing, and prosecuting fraud here in the state. Any member questions before we go to our last set of testifiers? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you.
And I'd ask that Mr. Bergeron, Ms. Edwards, and Maren Christensen-Hoffer come up to the table and introduce yourself, please. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Matthew Bergeron. I'm a healthcare and government relations attorney with the law firm of Larkin Hoffman. I've had the honor of appearing in front of this committee a number of times over the years on behalf of my legislative clients, generally focusing on representing associations of human services providers, particularly in disability services and behavioral health. However, today I'm testifying as an individual healthcare attorney who, in my legal practice outside of the state capitol, frequently advises health and human services providers on various compliance matters and who's represented organizations in DHS investigations and enforcement actions. I'm an active participant in the American Health Law Association and work in their fraud and abuse programming. Today I'm here to provide a few high-level comments and observations about how my clients and the human services providers, and I kind of want to make sure and distinguish that I'm talking about providers in the provision of care versus individuals receiving benefits, as maybe the last couple of testifiers were talking about. So focusing in that space and some of the observations I've had representing organizations kind of working through the systems. As many of you may know, fraud and abuse law generally has, at the federal level, there are three primary laws. There's the False Claims Act, the Anti-Kickback Statute, and the Self-Referral or Stark law. In Minnesota, actually has two of those three in our state code. The commissioner noted that the Anti-Claim Statute is not in our criminal code, but we do have it in our civil laws, and we do have a state False Claims Act. And the thing about the False Claims Act and the Anti-Kickback Statute is you have a very robust canon of law that providers can avail themselves of, and knowing what kind of arrangements work and what don't, what things have been deemed problematic in the past. In my experience representing providers in Minnesota, those statutes and those enforcement tools are not the basis of most enforcement actions from the Department of Human Services. Instead, there's general statutory authority to sanction providers for fraud, waste, and abuse. Those sanctions can include withholding of payments, suspending and terminating participation, the imposition of a fine, and monetary recovery. But the statutes don't define fraud, waste, and abuse. And instead, the Department of Human Services years ago in regulation has defined abuse. And it defines abuse as a pattern of practices that are inconsistent with sound fiscal, business, or health services, and that result in unnecessary costs to the program or reimbursements for services. And then the regulation proceeds to list 22 examples. And amongst those examples are things like failure to comply with statutory record-keeping requirements. That broad definition of abuse has, in my experience, been used oftentimes to examine and sanction providers for imperfect record-keeping, going so far as to seek monetary repayment for claims of which the records have not met maybe every single criteria in law, but by which there has been no allegation that the services weren't provided, that they weren't medically necessary, or that they weren't provided by the appropriate or credentialed individual to do that. Sometimes, in my experience, going as far as seeking 120% repayment of the claims actually paid. And in the disability services in particular, when the vast majority of the service is the labor of the direct service professional, if there's no dispute that that service was paid, between 80 and 90% of that reimbursement has already been paid out in wages and benefits to that individual. And so when these notices of overpayments come across alleging abuse for imperfect record keeping, that's oftentimes the end of the agency. And we've heard those conversations. Sometimes it's even quite insignificant. For example, the department has deemed abuse failing to circle AM or PM on timesheets, as in the case of nobility care versus the Department of Human Services. Missing signatures, dates, telephone numbers, emergency contact information, or other components of a care plan were deemed abuse, and overpayments were sought in the case of Smart Choice Healthcare Group. Or missing identification numbers on timesheets in the matter of the appeal of Trinity of Home Care Services. So my point in bringing this up is not to say that compliance with the record-keeping requirements aren't important. The statute also has a series of fines and sanctions up to 20% for repeated non-compliance for that. But when we focus on deeming those things as abuse, I think is when we miss some of the opportunities and some of the attentions to go after the intentional fraud. And the other piece I will note is those enforcement authorities are against the enrolled entity. And we talked about dollars that weren't being recovered because the entity went out of business. I represent a lot of small, rural, and culturally specific providers that when one of these when abuse is the grounds for a notice of overpayment, now they're facing a significant repayment, that business goes away, those services are no longer available, that debt is never collected, and that is a different instance than maybe if you were using the Anti-Kickback Statute or the False Claims Act, where there's individual liability. And maybe there'd be an opportunity to get after some of the bad actors there. The last thing I will note, and there's talk about various tools and enhanced authorities. There's comments about enforcing or about withholding payment while an investigation goes on. And I would just want to note for the committee's information that there's no time limit on those enforcements. And I've represented clients that have been informed of a temporary immediate withhold, had all payments cut off. The business goes away. They're only providing a Medicaid service, whether it's PCA services or a DWR service. So they're done. And at some period of time, they get back a letter that says, we didn't find any fraud, you can go ahead and resume providing services. There's no ability to get in front of a third party. There's no ability to figure out what the statute refers to a credible allegation. There's no idea to determine how credible that allegation is, no ability to get in front of a judge and say, is there something legitimate here, even without it being exposed to the investigated party. But there's no opportunity to say, hey, how long can you investigate before I have to know this kind of thing? I had one client where they seized bank accounts and investigated for over 3 years, never brought a case. And it wasn't until an action was brought in district court and you said, hey, we need the money in that bank account back, that eventually that it was released and there was no criminal prosecution. And so the last note I would say is I think the due process considerations, things when there are cases brought in court versus some of the Chapter 14 administrative proceedings and the expansive use of abuse are important considerations so that we ensure that the resources, the energies, and the prosecutorial time is focused on the intentional fraud, and that maybe we are a little bit more cognizant of how we're characterizing abuse and maybe some of the disproportionate impacts the past practices have had. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Ms. Edwards, would you like to introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony?
Bonjour, Jules Nindijnakas, Magazine and Dudem. That's an Ojibwe greeting. It means hello. My name is Jules, and I'm Anishinaabe Eagle Clan. Recently, thank you, Chair and members, for having me speak today. Recently, there have been allegations about fraud in what has been called autism centers, and I want to clarify that this alleged fraud occurred within applied behavior analysis centers. By focusing on the victims of this alleged fraud, autistic people, we are erasing that it is non-autistic organizations that are profiteering on the autistic community who are already vulnerable and lack access to self-determined services. ABA is a behavior modification program, which has been heavily marketed by private equity firms and the state of Minnesota through the EIDBI benefit. It is a specific methodology that was created by the same people that created gay conversion therapy. Often, ABA is ordered because primary care doctors think it is the default for an autism diagnosis. That's all that they know to order for children, and not because it's medically necessary. Too often, ABA providers claim to provide a therapy. Like gay conversion therapy, these providers are not therapists and are not qualified to provide therapy. Minnesota needs to hold ABA providers accountable for misrepresenting themselves as therapists, including withholding payments for ABA providers who fraudulently represent themselves as therapists. Most ABA direct providers are high school educated and have no special qualifications to provide services to disabled children. The lack of oversight of ABA is a financial liability to the state and taxpayers, as well as a risk to the safety of children. A daycare center that provides care to multiple children is required to be licensed in the state of Minnesota. ABA providers are not currently required to be licensed by the state. Despite ABA victims often being non-speaking people, there's little protection of these vulnerable children. These kids may not be able to report if they experience maltreatment. This is terrifying because we know that over 80% of girls with intellectual and developmental disabilities experience sexual assault in their lives, yet many will be unable to report. And if they can report, they are often not believed because of their disability. ABA providers need increased oversight, including licensing, and less freedom to do whatever they wish. Despite the ABA industry lobbying for increased power over the autism community, they need their power restricted until they can prove with empirical and independent evidence that they are doing what they claim to be doing. Fraud, waste, and abuse occur within ABA providers regularly. The state has identified potential fraud. TRICARE, it's a federal health insurance for military members and their families, has identified that ABA is not cost effective. A few years ago, they issued a report about the outcomes of this intervention that costs taxpayers billions, with a B, of dollars every year. It does not improve outcomes. It does not increase skills. It does not increase independence. It is a wasteful program. The autistic community that has been speaking on abuses that occur within ABA for years, but we're unheard. This includes emotional and physical abuse of vulnerable children. Minnesota has the opportunity to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse by increasing oversight of applied behavior analysis providers and stop marketing ABA as some kind of miracle treatment for disabled children. The state needs to divest from ABA and needs to increase opportunities for other EI-DBI benefit or methodologies that are more effective, more humane, and do not create the same fraud, waste, and abuse at the scale that ABA does. There are a lot of different methodologies that are culturally responsive, but right now ABA has essentially a monopoly. And to wrap it up, it hits all the points of fraud, waste, and abuse, and Minnesota needs to be more responsible with our tax dollars and protect our children at the same time.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards, for your testimony. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Last on our list, we have Ms. Christensen-Hofer. If you'd please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you so much, chairs and committee members. My name is Maren Christensen-Hofer, and I'm the executive director for a nonprofit organization called the Multicultural Autism Action Network, which serves families of children with disabilities primarily in our multicultural communities. And I was asked today to come and speak to you a little bit about how some of the fraud and abuse in our autism centers looks from a family perspective. When a child is first diagnosed with autism, it's important to understand that a family has often been waiting years for that diagnosis. The wait lists are incredibly long to get to the point where you have a diagnosis, and if you are a child of color, it's often 15 months to 18 months longer. Once you get that diagnosis for your child, you are really hit over the head with the message that you must engage in early intervention with as much intensity and intensivity and dosage as possible. Families are told that if they don't get early interventions for services for their children, they're being an irresponsible parent. I personally was told that if I didn't get my child in early intervention services right away, that he was likely to end up in prison or worse. And this creates such a culture of fear where families feel desperate to get some kind of activity, some type of intervention services going. And again, it goes without saying that the wait lists for those services are incredibly long. Can you imagine hearing, you've waited for 2 years for a diagnosis, and then you've got to wait another 2 years for you till you can get your kid in services. And if you're going for, the best, most qualified providers, you can probably add another year onto that. So it's no wonder that it creates this culture where families are really desperate for some kind of activity. They'll put their kids in services because they've gotten this message that they're not welcome in schools, they've been kicked out of daycare. If you do go to a school, it's only in the most restrictive setting that's available for your child. So we have this climate that's really contributing to this perfect storm. Those factors, along with the incredibly high prevalence of autism rates, specifically in some of our multicultural communities, and the lack of culturally specific providers, really create the situation where families are desperate. And, maybe we'll make some decisions about providers that they would prefer not to, really because they don't have a lot of options. My message to you, if nothing else, is that when you're thinking about how to prevent waste, fraud, abuse, please engage with families, engage with the autism community. Talk to us about how these proposals will actually affect families. We've seen over and over again how things can come from a really great place of intentions, but we miss the mark when we don't include the people who are most affected at the table. That's my message to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen-Hofer. Really appreciate your testimony and sharing your perspective here today. And I would just say to members, I hope this hearing underscored that this committee believes that waste, fraud, and abuse is a problem here in Minnesota within Human Services. And I've been impressed by the number of solutions that have been brought forward by all of our testifiers. And I think it gives this committee some work to do over the course of this session to make sure that we're implementing and giving our agencies the tools they need, making sure we're understanding the provider perspective. And so I look forward to working with all of you to continue this work. Any quick thoughts or questions from anyone else before we adjourn here today?
Next week.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Hoffman.
So I think next week, there's already, David has informed me, there's a list of bills that have come through. I know that there was a stack, it was an Utke stack about 10 inches thick, so I think we'll probably get to those next week and a follow-up on this. And to your point, thank you for doing this. Lots of great conversation. There should be some bills coming out of here. I mean, we're doing that, so, and then you want to, that's it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hoffman, and yeah, please keep your eyes out for agendas for our hearings next week. And with that, the committee is adjourned. Thank you.